Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Children and Young People Scrutiny panel. I would like to do the housekeeping first. The fire alarm and a fire practice is not expected. If the alarm sounds, can all present leave the building as quickly as possible by the way of the nearest exit to the assembly point in the public square outside the cast, beyond the fountain, away from the civic office. No roll call will be undertaken. If anyone has mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located, and use the intercom situated to the left-hand side of the lift doors to call for assistance. Mobile phones, I would also like to ask everyone to ensure that your mobile phone is switched to silent mode, please. Filming of the meeting. This meeting will be audio-visually recorded and will be available to view on the Council's website and YouTube channel. Can I ask all those present to use their microphones to ensure the audio can be captured? Any members of the public entering the Council chamber are accepted that their images will be retained and broadcast by the Council. Public in attendance during the meeting. If any member of the public or press is intended to record or film any part of today's meeting, please ensure that this does not disturb the conduct of the meeting. If you are visually recording, you are requested to do only focus on recording of the meeting. Introductions. Please can I ask that everyone introduces themselves, starting with myself. So my name's Rebecca Booth and I'm the Councillor of the Bentley Ward and also the chair of today's panel.
Thank you, Chair. Lee Goltz. I'm Service Director for Partnerships and other things in Doncaster for Doncaster Council.
I'm Andy Hood, the Strategic Lead for Practice Improvement in Children's Services.
I'm Joan Briggs, Ward Councillor for Eglinton and Walmsworth.
Hello, I'm Paul Cutts. I'm Councillor for Wheatley Intake Ward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Anderson, Ward Councillor for Rossington, Bawtry and Austerfield.
Hi, I'm Anthony Dodds, Councillor for Mexborough.
Afternoon, Antoinette Drinkill, Co-op Tea, representing the Anglican Diocese of Sheffield.
Good afternoon, Nikki Brown, Ward Councillor for Adwick, Carcroft, Woodlands and Highfields.
Georgina Light for invitee and representation from the NJC trade unions.
Good afternoon, I'm Christine Rothwell and I'm the Senior Governance Officer.
I will now move to the agenda for today's meeting. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have apologies from absence from Rhianna Nelson, the Executive Director for Children, Young People and Families, Rebecca Wall, Service Director, Children, Young People and Families, Bernadette Nesbitt, the Education Co-op Tea, and Councillor Kieran Leigh. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Agenda item 2, to consider the extent, if any, to which the public and press are to be excluded from the meeting. There are no issues on the agenda which requires the exclusion of the press or the public. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest, if any. If you have any interest, please declare this and a form will need to be completed following the meeting. Please contact Christine Rothwell after the meeting who can assist you. Agenda item 4 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of July 2025. Are the minutes of the meeting agreed as a correct record? Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Agenda item 5 is public statements. So there's no public here. I note that there are no public in attendance, so I will move on to the next item. Agenda item 6. I would like to introduce officers to provide a short overview of the report.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, Councillor. Good start. Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, councillors. Hope you're all well. Forgive the glasses coming on and off, as I explained before. I'm kind of learning about them. We outlined the Families First Partnership Programme at the last report that came to the last meeting. So I don't intend to go through lots of the context and some of the background because you've already had that. I do, however, want to highlight some of that. The purpose of this report is to introduce the Doncaster family model, which is how we're going to deliver the Families First programme in Doncaster. So we're calling Families First in Doncaster the Doncaster Families Model, and that is after consultation with children and families. It captures what this will mean for children and families. The report looks at how we will implement the national policy changes at a local level, and we think this is a significant piece of transformation. It's directed by national government and is linked to lots of policies that have happened over the last year, both independently at a national and a local level. We think it will take us 4 years to deliver. Unfortunately, there is funding in place for the next 4 years. So we do have a guaranteed prevention grant, as confirmed in the June spending review, to see us through that period of time to be able to enact these changes. The report outlines the measures, metrics and reporting requirements, and importantly, the key milestones and the impact we're expecting for children, young people and families. So I'll lift out some of the relevant sections, if I may. So in terms of context, the Families First programme aims to transform the way that children's social care is delivered. It's got a clear focus on early intervention, ensuring families get the right support at the right time. This is not about strengthening and having more families in children's social care. It's about providing support to children and families earlier outside of statutory services, i.e. social care. It involves establishing multidisciplinary family help services. It means strengthening multi-agency child protection arrangements, and it increases the role of family networks. The headline of a family network being, before any child is considered to be moved into care, be that fostering arrangements or above, any possibilities or opportunities for a family member to provide support and parenting or caring responsibilities for that child, needs to be explored. We do that in Doncaster already. What the policy is telling us that we need to do more of it, and that is something absolutely we'd want to do. The Doncaster family model has been developed with families and staff. Families have shared with us what they want the model to look like, and they've told us 4 or 5 things. None of it is new, which is provides some assurance that we're on the right track, but the model is based around what families are telling us. The 5 things they are telling us that they want a consistent worker. They don't want the worker to change. They don't want to be referred from one service to the other. If I'm a young person that requires some support and I'm referred to Andy as my lead practitioner, I want him to stay overseeing my care throughout the journey. They are less worried when the worker isn't a social worker. For some families, they are worried that when there's social work involvement, a child will be taken from their care. They're happy for social workers to step in and step out to support other workers, but they prefer it when that worker is a differently qualified worker, i.e. early help worker, targeted early help worker, health visitor, or somebody from school, for example. They want to only tell their story once, so not multiple assessments. I don't want to be referred to different places and tell the same story multiple times. I want to tell you once, and I want to be able to connect with a relationship to you, so the support that you provide me is based on me telling you what I've told you on one occasion. And when we tell them things, we want the language to be simpler. And families tell us that they feel better connected and they get better outcomes when they have that consistency of worker. So that's really important for us to hear, and that's what the model is based on. It is worth noting that we have a really good track record of doing this. So the recent LGA peer review of early help services found that actually our staff were really good at forming relationships with families and children, and actually the outcomes for those families were better when they had that consistency of worker. That was replicated in the recent Ofsted inspection where we were graded as good. So it's not, I want to really reiterate the point, we aren't starting from scratch here, we are starting from a position of strength in much of this, and that's really useful for us to know. So what will it mean for residents? Ultimately, it should mean that more families stay together. We aim to reduce the number of children that need support from acute services, be that mental health services or social care, i.e. child protection. We expect over time, because we'll have less children in those expensive acute services, that services will cost less. There should be more money that stays in children's services for the universal early help services. But more importantly, it should facilitate better outcomes for children and families, and they may manifest themselves as better educational attainment, better mental or physical health, and generally families feel more supported and can function better, and generally and hopefully children and families will feel happier. We've been running a pilot in the north of the city, and the things I've talked around better connectivity, families feeling better supported, and less families going into acute services, we're seeing that. The pilot is showing us that. Of those families that have been involved in the pilot, only one of them has had to be escalated into children's social care. I think we've had around about 35 families, 35 children involved, and 17 cases that have been closed. And that means, of those cases that have been closed, no more work is needed for that particular family help service. 16 of those have either remained in early help or have been stepped down because actually that family no longer needed support. Only one has escalated into children's social care. And that's really important for us to think about because it gives us the confidence in the model. There's lots in the paper about policy. And again, I'm not going to go through that in too much detail other than to say it's all pointing towards early intervention and how as a partners we work better to provide support to families at the earliest possible opportunity. There's a whole range of objectives we're going to talk about on page 16. Again, you've seen them in this paper and the previous one, so don't intend to go through that. I do think it's important, however, to end on the key milestones and the impact. So year one is the year of transformation. That's where we are now. This programme started in April. It focuses on the engagement of families and stakeholders, and hopefully you can see that we're already on with that. The things I've told you that families have told us are a real clear part of that. Over the next 2 months, we've got a detailed forward plan where myself, Andy and colleagues are going out to tell anybody who stands still long enough around families first. We're going out to health colleagues. We've been out to education colleagues. We're going out to exec level so we get senior buy-in, but then also really running down into frontline staff to say, these are the principles. This is what families are telling us. Help us design and reshape services. So we're doing it very much in conjunction with families and with staff. We're delighted that we've recruited to 3 key posts this year so far. We have a new transformation lead. We have a new lead that will oversee the practice changes that we've got. Our health seconded post starts on the 1st of October, and our lead from South Yorkshire Police will start imminently. Before the year's out as well, we expect to see more early help staff, more therapeutic staff coming on board as well. All that will really boost our capacity to accelerate the transformation. Year 2 is the first full year of implementation, and this is when services become embedded into the changes of practice. From this year, we expect to start to see reductions in the number of children in care, the number in child protection, and an increase in the numbers of children and families supported in early help and family help. That, as a consequence, should see some of our out-of-area costs reduce. Year 3 is we start to see business as usual, and we'll just continue. This will be an embedded transformation will have ceased. This is just what we do. This is the day job. And year 4 is one of consolidation and also keeping an eye nationally on any changing policies or practice. So in conclusion, we feel that by implementing the Doncaster family model, we expect to see more children staying at home with their families, improved educational attainment, happier families, more children and families supported in early help, less children in care and in child protection, and a reduction in some of our really expensive costs of acute services. Thank you, and we'll invite any questions. Okay.
Thank you, Lee. I would like to now move on to questions with Antoinette Drinkhill, an Education Co-optee, taking the first question.
Thanks for such a succinct and clear summary, because it was a difficult document to read. There was a lot in there, wasn't there? So thank you for that. And I think you're absolutely right. Early intervention is the only way forward. But in terms of something that's mentioned on paragraph 10 is that the offer will rebalance the focus on help, which is great, but even when there may be a risk of harm. So I think my question is around, although it's an important and positive step forward, how are we going to put stops and checks in to ensure that if there is a risk of harm, we ensure that doesn't occur?
Thank you. So as Lee has outlined, this programme will require us to reshape how we deliver services to children, young people and families. However, at this stage, we aren't planning major changes to the way that we deliver our child protection services, which are referred to in the new proposals as multi-agency child protection teams. What we will do is build on our strength in this area already. As you'll know, Ofsted rated as good in this area in the inspection just less than a year ago, so that we know we've got good mechanisms for managing risk, interfamilial, extrafamilial risk for children and families. What we are doing is being more focused on areas that are challenging within the district for us. Recently, we've been looking closely with our partners, South Yorkshire Police, about how we support the return of missing children quicker, as a very recent practice example. What I can assure you on, though, is that a qualified and experienced social worker will be involved in all child protection processes as they are now. Where a strategy discussion is required, this will be overseen by a qualified social work team manager. Where a child is made subject to a child protection plan, the lead professional will be a suitably qualified and experienced social worker, and they will oversee the core group with those other professionals, particularly those that's continuing that relationship with the child, as Lee mentioned. But at all stages, it will be a qualified and experienced social worker. So, to support this, our quality assurance mechanisms, which are robust and well developed, will continue to report on the efficacy of our child protection work and the outcomes for those children. So we are assured that the model that we currently operate, which has been very recently evaluated by Ofsted as effective, will continue. And in fact, we expect it to be enhanced by virtue of the fact that there will be a person working with that child and family who has that quality relationship with them to ensure that the necessary measures that are determined by the Child Protection Chair are embedded in the child's plan and delivered.
Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinette. Question 2, Councillor Brown.
Afternoon, thank you. Paragraph 16. Are there sufficient numbers of social workers to be able to allocate a valued, supported and highly skilled social worker for every child that needs one?
Thank you, Councillor. The short answer is yes, but to expand on that, we are constantly monitoring the caseloads of social workers and also the management span of control, which is the number of individual children that managers oversee. So, to give you some assurance, in November 2023, we had 18 social workers out of a total FTE of 133 with caseloads over 25. And that is a challenge in terms of relationship-based practice principles. Although I'm pleased to report that in July this year, there were only 3 social workers with caseloads over 25. And of those 3, 2 had large sibling groups, which sometimes happens. So, you know, if a social worker picks up a family and there's 7 children in it, and that does happen occasionally, that can skew the rate. During 24-25, 11 social workers left the organisation. It's a variety of reasons. So we have people who are promoted, people who move to other authorities, people who retire. In July 2025, we had 4 social work vacancies. One of those has just been allocated to a social worker in their newly qualified year, what we refer to as their ASYE year. And recently we've had to close our ASYE advert because we've got, the system's full. We don't need to recruit more social workers in their first year post-experience. We need more experience for those 3 remaining posts that we've got. So our recruitment position continues to improve. Doncaster is seen by the sector as a good place to work. Our Ofsted outcome helped with that, undoubtedly. And we continue to attract high-quality social work professionals across the system. So that's slightly longer, but the answer is yes.
Thank you. That's good that it's improved so much.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Question 3, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm just looking, I think it's sort of similar, isn't it, to the question 2, but I'll ask it anyway. On page 15, paragraph 22, it says that families like having a lead worker and that co-working with a social worker feels less of a worry as they only have to go over that story once. So I gather from that this means working with the same person. So how likely is this to happen that they can have this sort of working relationship with the same person?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Anderson. As Andy says, having stability of staff makes such a huge difference. When you've got a high number of agency staff or a high turnover, even with the best will in the world, even though we might want that lead practitioner to be the same person, if there's such a turnover of staff, it's very difficult. So the stability of workforce is crucial. I mean, our plan is that they will have the same lead professional from entering early help through to family help, and that's very much the case, and we expect that to happen in the vast majority of cases. There are two scenarios where that won't happen. The first one is just natural churn and turnover of staff, although again, the stability that we're seeing should minimise that. The second one is, if a child does step into legal proceedings, so child protection, for example, the worker, the lead professional, has to be a qualified social worker. So if they enter into early help or family help, and me as an early help worker working with that family, as soon as they step into statutory legal framework of child protection, it has to be social working. But the way we will do it differently is that I will maintain a relationship and work with that family. It's just that social worker will take over because legally they have to.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've got a supplementary. Is it a supplementary? Sorry, yeah. Thank you. Excuse me, and apologies for being late, colleagues. So we talk about families liking continuity and the same worker, and we talk about relational and restorative. So that is a key driver because everything's relational based. And if you know somebody, you've got to connect with somebody, then you're more likely to be able to promote and invoke change. So if the key for families within early help is about changing whatever they want to, it's easier if it's working with in a restorative model. Can you tell me, because I understand that Mark Finnis might be coming along, can you tell me how important relational and restorative practice is and where it fits, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Needham. So I'll start, and then I'll let Andy, who's better at the practice bit than me, kind of come in. So as part of this and the early stages of Families First, we've merged the social work and early help practice frameworks together. And a key part of that is restorative practice, relational work, trauma-informed, solutions-focused. That makes up the cog that I see. It's crucially important, as you know, where you have good relationships, whether you're a social worker, whether you're a youth worker, whether you're an early help worker, it's relationships that generally bring around that connectivity and better outcomes. We're underpinning that with a significant restorative practice training plan for staff. Doncaster Safeguarding Partnership Board have committed significant sums to roll out a restorative practice training programme. So we're going to enable a workforce to be skilled, to be experienced, and therefore have the autonomy to make independent decisions that are spaced around a practice framework. Andy, I don't know if you have anything.
Thanks, Lee. I suppose what I would say is that what we know is that children and families are the experts in their own lives. We as professionals lean in occasionally, sometimes invited, sometimes because there's risk. But it's families that make a difference over time. So the interventionist model that the whole system has had for a considerable period hasn't always listened well enough to families and about the strengths that exist within those families. And that's what we really need to lean into. We need to understand family strengths. We need to understand the resources that exist in those families. And part of this overall approach is increasing our use of things like family network meetings, family group conferencing. So building plans where the people, and it doesn't even have to be a family, it's people connected to that family, trusted individuals, can help support and hold up these families when there's challenge and there's difficulty. A big piece of what we're doing at the moment, actually, going back to something Lee said about those iterative learning experiments, is with our special guardianship orders. So, sometimes when a parent isn't able to care for their own child for whatever reason, a grandparent steps in, for example, and is awarded a special guardianship order. And the thing with that is sometimes a grandparent might step in when they're, say, 70 and the child's 6, and they can manage that perfectly well. But as a child becomes a teenager, there's all sorts of new challenges, particularly in terms of their online safety. If you think about children's online lives, And how do we equip those grandparents in this ever-changing world around technology to be able to provide that safe care? Well, part of that is building long-term family plans. So when we place children, we don't think about just this year, we think about year 5, year 10, which is a big change in ethos. But all of that is relational. It's about getting to know that family, working alongside them, and crucially doing with, not to. And we know that families have told us across the UK, not a Doncaster-based thing, but quite often they feel like social care intervention, particularly at the acute stage, is done to them. And this is the big change here is we're going to try as much as we can to do with. Recognising, of course, that sometimes there are interfamilial risks that mean that we do have to intervene. But wherever we can, we're going to try and build resilience in those families.
Thank you. Yes, so I challenge, I support is the answer I would suggest. Interesting you talk about families not wanting to be told what to do, and that the answer is quite often within as it is. And you spoke about family networks, and I guess with SGOs it's kinship as well. So what kind of an importance has that got, and how about training staff to do that? Is that something alongside the restorative work that needs to be refreshed or put forward?
It's a good question, and we are resourcing it. So we're putting in a whole new team. We're currently recruiting for it now. So we have got an SGO support team. It's relatively small. We're bringing in a whole new team, and one of those things in terms of kinship and SGO care, there's going to be I said 24 hour. There's going to be an advice line that carers can ring at any point during in the day to get immediate advice and guidance and support. After which we'll follow in with intervention if we need it. But sometimes you just need someone to say, you've seen something on your child's phone. What is this? Well, they'll have that capacity to do that, which we've never had that before. So that's just one practical example of how we're thinking of implementing the change.
The other thing as well is, through the money that we've got through the prevention grant, we're going to have 10 new early help workers that we're going to have extra capacity. We're going to double the multi-systemic therapy, child abuse and neglect team. So we're going to have more interventions on there. So we're going to have extra capacity. We're going to have a dedicated and well-embedded practice framework. And we've got quite an extensive workforce development plan that will sit underneath it. We're really committed to this because actually we know this is the bit that's going to really work.
That's great. My only other kind of because I think on my feet, don't I? So if it's about continuity and it's about having somebody that a family's got a relationship with, then the difficulty then is how do you bring that across multidisciplinary? So if you want something that's a bit more, I don't know, and so if there's one worker, one family, one plan through the early out model, are you confident that that kind of works and there's enough process for people to come in and out and in and out and in and out whilst maintaining the continuity that the family need?
So that's a very good question. And we were with the DFE just this morning talking about learning from other areas. And they've seen in some other areas where family health workers have been district nurses, for example, which has never been seen before in the UK. Now, that is probably phase 2 for us. At the beginning, we're focusing very much on our internal services and the change that needs to happen there. But the conversations that we're having with all services are, now that anybody with suitably differently qualified experience can hold child in need work, you need to start thinking about what this means for your organisation. So some of the services that I manage, things like the youth justice services, the child exploitation services, EPIC, which is a youth crime prevention targeted youth service, they are not workers that have historically held children who are sin. But in late autumn, we've got a whole service event where we're talking about, well, what might this mean for you and your work moving forward? How do you support a child in terms of their offending behaviour within a criminal justice context, and at the same time potentially be responsible for their child in need plan? These are big questions, and this is why the implementation phase is actually so long, because all local authorities have not had to ask themselves these things before. So the sector is learning sort of as it goes to a certain extent.
For me, just jump in. The other bit as well is there's a big culture change here. So fundamentally, if you're asking workers that have managed lower levels of risk, in theory to manage higher levels of risk, so if an early health worker is not managing children in need, i.e. lower complexities, we're asking them to do that. There's a fear, for example. There's also the practicalities around payment, and actually you're asking me to do a bigger job, so actually there's issues around that. But there is something cultural about how do we break down some of the stigma that some of these cases have to be managed by social workers, because they don't, but historically the system has told us that they do. And also, how do we equip staff through empowerment, through giving them autonomy, through good workforce development, and actually sometimes paying them at a higher grade to make sure that we've got a bigger capacity workforce to be able to do the things that you've mentioned, Councillor Needham, and the things we've talked about. For me, getting extra people in there is the easy part. The culture change and that movement around who manages risk at certain levels is going to be the real challenge. And we've seen that across the Pathfinders.
Because I could talk all day.
Thank you, Councillor Needham, my advice. Now to question 4, Councillor Anthony Dodds.
Hi. So in paragraph 25, it speaks of a reduction in children being looked after, but it gives figures in per 10,000 population. What are the figures, please?
Yeah, so apologies. That's my fault. I wrote that part of the report. I should have put the actual numbers in. I've been doing this long enough to know that, so apologies, Councillor Dodds. So there 82.7 equates to 530 children in care, 79.4 equates to 509, so the reduction of 21, which actually doesn't sound massive, but our children in care numbers have hovered around 510, 520 for quite a while, so to reduce them by around 21 for that period of time is a positive sign for us.
Thank you, Councillor Dodds. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, on page 15, paragraph 26, it says that early intervention, targeted family support and supporting the whole family makes a difference and prevents most families from needing more acute service intervention. So basically, what would trigger an early intervention and what does an early intervention look like?
I'll try not to go on for ages because we've got loads of interventions and I'm really passionate about this. But the trigger would be a request for help, wherever that comes from, whatever that looks like. Fundamentally, whether there's a referral or some ask for something, it's somebody somewhere identifying that there's a need for some support or help. That, I don't know if it's when if the typing is because it's catching the mic from under there. Oh, Bobby Paul, sorry. And a request for help could come from anywhere. It could come from mum, could come from auntie, it could come from the police, could come from school, could come from families or professionals. So that would trigger an offer of support. That offer of support would come from varying levels. If you think around pre-social care, because that's when it becomes statutory, in Doncaster we've got a really extensive local help offer, an early help offer. So if you think about the local help offer, you may be aware of the Your Family teams that are based out in communities. There's one at Woodlands, we've got one in Armthorpe, and what they are, they're multidisciplinary teams that provide a walk-in service for families. You don't need a referral, you can just pop in, and positively, over half of the families that are seen in there just walk in, they're not a referral, and they come in and they're predominantly provided support around finances, debt, food, housing, and then parenting. So lots of them aren't directly related to children, but obviously have a direct and indirect consequence and impact on family life. They see around about 10,000 people a year, and the interventions they offer, generally advice and guidance, short-term interventions, so it might well be they need some advice around parenting that can be done quite quickly. They could give access to a parenting course. It might well be just some advice around debt or finance. We have Citizens Advice Bureau services based in those teams. It's a one-stop shop really, where you can just pop in, and even if you're not quite sure what help you need, you can sit with them and they'll talk it through with you and try and find, either directly provide that support or hold your hand into that other level of support. We've also got 12 family hubs, and I'm sure you'll have all heard or seen about our family hubs. Again, please come and see one of them. They are amazing. They are a whole range, they provide a whole range of interventions. They do a lot around that 0 to 5 area, so we have speech and language sessions and play therapy sessions for parents, baby massage, basic parenting skills, actually lots of newborns. I've got this baby, what am I going to do? Actually just some of the basic parenting things that are actually quite terrifying when you've got a newborn baby and you're at home for that first time. There's a lot of interventions that they offer, and they are seen by DFE as best practice They see around about 40,000 families last year. They have health visitors embedded in there. They have midwifery embedded in there. They have early years workers in there. There's a real focus on that first 1,001 days, because we know if we get that right, it makes such a difference. And then if we move into early help, Councillor Anderson, a little bit, we've got early help workers. We've got early help workers universal and then into targeted. And again, they'll provide a whole range of interventions. The reason you might get referred into early help is that you might be worried about your child's health, development or behaviour, or perhaps you're caring for a disabled child. It might be that a parent or a loved one is affected by relationships, substance misuse, alcohol, anxiety, finances. And the work that they do is a whole range of interventions, and the best way for me to describe that is just go and have a look at one, because just by being in there you can sense all the work that they do. They really do wrap around that support for families, and they wrap it around 10 outcomes that we look at. So the whole purpose of the family hubs is to try and provide and support families around getting a good education, good early years development, improvements in mental and physical health, improved family relationships, keeping children safe from abuse and exploitation, crime and prevention, tackling crime and secure housing, and really just a community venue for people to pop in, have that peer support. One of the things that really comes out well is the peer support classes around mother and baby, or increasingly father and babies, around that shared experience and that shared learning. The support is all based on an assessment, family assessment. I've touched on before now. The social care and the early help assessments will join as one, as part of the Families First. And it's a strengths-based assessment, so it's not what can't you do or what are the problems. It's very much building on that family strength. So as Councillor Needham stated earlier, actually the answers to a lot of these problems the families have already got. The family hubs and our really help workers just help them tease that out and support them with it, and that's why that consistent work is really important. Is that okay?
I have visited some of the family hubs and they do great work, yes. I've visited some of the dad's sessions as well, which are really good, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I believe you have another question.
Yeah, on page 16, paragraph 27, it says that the Doncaster family model, along with the investment, will ensure service and partners are more focused on early help and prevention. It then says, if successful, then Doncaster will be a city where more children stay safely at home or within the family. So that bit jumped out at me. So as it states, if successful, how confident are you that it will be successful?
I think we're confident it'll be successful. So we're confident to the extent that we're forecasting a reduction in children at child protection and in care level collectively of 10% a year on year from the end of year 2 onwards. So when we make these type of predictions, it has, as Lee said in his presentation at the start, an implication on something called the care ladder, which is where we predict future financial costs to the authority in terms of out-of-authority children's placements. So we are confident that we will see a reduction. And the reasons why, I suppose we've already outlined, it's that consistent relationship with an individual, which, if relational practice is done properly and appropriately, will improve familial functioning and will reduce risk. And alongside that, that on its own will not make all the change, but the change in the practice model to family network meetings used almost across all the families, more use of family group conferencing, better support for SGO carers, because we know that's where we're seeing an increase in our care population. And then the iterative learning experiments that we've mentioned already, like the things we're doing with the police around missing. So that's a really important one, because sometimes children go missing from home and they just, most children are found within 24 hours in Doncaster, actually. That is the vast majority. But sometimes when children get to 17 and they're in care, they repeatedly go missing. Sometimes it's because they're going to visit a girlfriend or boyfriend. Sometimes it's for reasons linked to exploitation. When children are living at home and that's happening, there becomes a point in the child protection procedures where you might have to bring that child into care because the family can't support that care. Well, we hope we won't get to those points as frequently, because we'll have that intervention much earlier, so those issues don't build up over time, resulting in the child have to enter. So we are confident that this will work. It is a national model. A huge amount of research is going to this by the government to develop it, looking at what works. And the start of this was a report in 2023, Stable Homes Built on Love, about the experience of children in the care system and how we improve those. And that has led to a government response and these social care reforms. So these are the most far-reaching reforms to children's social care practice, certainly in the last 20 years. And I think the government wouldn't implement these with the additional resource if they didn't think it would work, and we think it'll work locally.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Antoinette?
I think you've partially answered this question, but how early is early? Because, you know, when you speak to midwives, they can often tell you which families fairly accurately are going to have issues and problems in the future. So does it start pre-birth if necessary?
Yeah, so, you know, my thoughts on the importance of early years. And, you know, the National Start for Life programme is mandating that we have a real focus on the first 1,001 days, so from conception through to 2. We've been... We implemented a 1,001 days pilot about 5 years ago before the Start for Life programme, mainly because we had the luxury of having a really well-established family hub model. The Start for Life programme is really focused on improving the outcomes for babies and in the early years settings, and it's crucially important that we do that. And there's a number of ways in which to do that. We have received Start for Life grant funding, and we've got confirmation that we will continue to receive that money. Local, central government is committed to this agenda. I would say in Doncaster we do it well. Like I say, we've already been running 1,001 days programmes for ages. The partnership working around 1,001 days, so early years workers, our midwifery services, health visitors are co-located in some of our family hubs. So they all work together around single plans. I think one of the measures around if we're doing it well or not, and it can be a little bit of a crude measure, is around school readiness. Now, there are a number of things that make it ready, but that is the metric that we are using nationally. And what I would say is that central government have set a new target that all children, 75% of children, need to be school ready. Now, the target in Doncaster has been set at 77.6, because our starting position is above lots of other places. So we have a stretch target from where we start. So that gives us confidence. Some of the other things that we do is, and just by way of an example, we have a pregnancy liaison meeting. So if there's a family pre-birth in them conception where we're worried, and that might well be that there is previous children that have been removed from home, living standards, or issues around parental substance misuse or mental health, there is a partnership pregnancy liaison meeting where they'll have conversations around looking at safety plans for babies, for example. Again, looking at the strengths of parents, fundamentally making sure that that baby is safe and will have the best opportunities to thrive. The other thing kind of touch on as well is that about 98% of our early years providers are rated good or outstanding. So the first 1,001 days crucially important, but actually beyond that, and once you start to get into those early years foundation stages, we've got good providers that provide good services to our children and young people, and that shows itself in our school readiness scores. This is one of, in my area, which is early years, this is our, with Families First programme, this is our key priority for the next 3 years, and also our DCS's priority, because we know, and research tells us, if you get things right in those really early stages, the outcomes for children are better, the outcomes for families are better, and it's cheaper.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that you are right to broad measure school readiness, but actually, if you minimise the hurdles along the way and maximise the support where it's required, it is a good measure of how the first, let's say, 1,001 days have gone.
Thank you, Antoinette. Paragraph 28, section D. Are there any sufficient numbers of foster carers in the borough to provide placements for children needing them?
I'll take this one. We always need more foster carers, is the honest answer. But currently, of the 503 children who are looked after by the City of Doncaster, 322 are cared for by foster carers. So there is a national demand for foster carers and for increasing foster care. But we're doing everything we can to ensure that we recruit more. And in fact, the transfer of the trust back from to the council and the rebranding of the foster service to Foster for Doncaster led to increased inquiries and increased number of foster carers becoming registered. We also engage in lots of different things, including the Remake Festival, Armed Forces Day, Pride. At Doncaster College, we promote the fostering service wherever we can. If you access the local authorities' leisure centres, you will have heard those adverts in the changing rooms in leisure centres. So we're doing everything we can to ensure them more. But why we need more is because foster carers are just like you and me. Things happen in their lives which means that for periods they can't foster, so they experience significant bereavement, they break a leg. So even if we had foster carers for every single child, we would still need more because, like I say, life happens. And foster carers' individual circumstances change and they're not employees. That's really important to know. But also, it's also important to say that fostering isn't right for every child. Some children do not want to live in a fostering environment. They are better off in a children's home or a semi-supported setting. So it's about having a balanced, a mixed economy of provision that meets all children's needs. But if you ask me, do we need more foster carers, I will always say yes, because we always will.
Thank you. Antoinette?
I think my question follows on from that, and it's about accommodation for those that require or need accommodation as opposed to being in a foster family.
So, yeah, we are always increasing the number of internal provisions that we've got. So we have, in the last 2 years, created a new home for children with disabilities at Acorn Lodge that didn't previously exist, and refurbished Oaklands, which is our short breaks home as well. We've expanded our supported accommodation offer, our partnership with St Ledger Homes, which is about our shared tenancies for children transitioning to independence. 4 years ago, we had 1 2-bedroom flat. Today, we've got 15 placements for children, and that partnership continues to develop, and that's great because that means that when children leave care, they stay in Doncaster in sustainable, affordable accommodation. We are currently developing an emergency provision right now at Hatfield Water Park, which is a bungalow. Sometimes children need to be, sometimes the police utilise something called police powers of protection, where they attend at a property and the risk is so great that they need to remove the child immediately. Sometimes we need emergency accommodation, while we do work with children and families to get them home safely. We're developing and registering that provision at Hatfield Water Park right now. We've commenced work again at Hatfield Water Park on a second part of our independence provision, which will provide another 5 to 7 beds for children, and we hope that can all be completed, if not by the end of this year, then very early into next year. We've got a stay and put framework, which you may be aware of. So when a child reaches 18, they can, the phrase is stay put with their foster carers, and that involves an allowance paid by the local authority to that foster carer. But if you think that the average age of a child leaving their normal family homes goes up every year, I think it's currently something like 28 when children leave home. So we should be trying to offer that opportunity as well. And in fact, that increases our resilience, and it puts less pressure on social housing for children who don't have a foster carer that they can stay put with. So we're constantly recruiting in our residential services, because residential recruitment is as challenging, it's more challenging now actually than it used to be in terms of recruiting social workers. But we are at a point where we'll be able to open our 2 Skylarks and register our 2 Skylarks homes in the north of the borough within the next 3 to 6 months. And even again, I'll answer it in the same way that I did to the foster care question: you always need more. But we are heavily committed to investing in and developing provision within the city. You might recall that Lee and I were sat here some 4 years ago talking about the future placement strategy, how we were going to do this, and this is the fruits of that activity. So yes, Doncaster is highly committed. Do we need more? Absolutely, but only in the same way as we need more foster carers.
But going in the right direction.
Thank you, Antoinette. Next question, Councillor Anderson or Antoinette, who wants to take lead on it?
On paragraph 33, what factors were taken into account by local forecasting when deciding the percentage change targets, in addition to the outcomes delivered by the early FFP Pathfinder areas?
Apologies. So first of all, you make a point about the Pathfinder areas, and the learning from them has been invaluable. But of course, it's not directly applicable to Doncaster. Every city is so different. So the first thing that we do is look at our local practice knowledge. So many of us have worked in Doncaster for too many years to count, really. So we are from here, we understand the local context, we understand what the demographic of children looks like. And we know that's fairly stable, actually, in terms of the profile of need in Doncaster. And then we look at trends in terms of performance across child in need, child protection and children in care, and what causes those increases and decreases over time. So, for example, we can predict with a fairly good degree of certainty that the number of contacts and referrals to MASH, the assessment service, the front door of social care, will go down in summer every year because there are less professionals with eyes on children, i.e. children are at home, they're not in school. So we see less referrals. We know we'll see a spike in September because children return to school, and for some families things have got much worse over the summers. So we see increase around those times. But we've been able to predict that trend over time by analysing our data through our performance frameworks. So it allows us to sort of start to build a picture of what things happen in Doncaster regularly, and that lets us predict trend. And in most cases, our trend predictions are reasonably accurate. Now, of course, sometimes things happen that can't be foreseen. A couple of years ago, we had 2 really large sibling groups coming into care from police protection. That was a totally right decision, but we hadn't forecast 14 extra children coming in. That's always going to happen. There's always going to be some incidences which cannot be foreseen. But in the majority of cases, our local practice knowledge, comparing ourselves to our partners, comparing ourselves to similar local authorities in terms of demographic, deprivation, size, and talking to the pathfinders helps us predict it. So that's basically how we do it.
Just coming as well there, Councillor Anderson. Also, we've got some money for more staff. Yeah. So we're going to have more capacity, certainly more capacity in early help. The change in legislation and the policy is actually more families are held lower down the system, and as a direct consequence of that, we'll have less families in social care. We think all the things that Andy have said, but also the profiling of extra capacity and caseloads and how many, what the caseloads is and how many children can be supported by those additional staff brings us to this number.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I believe you have another question?
Yeah, on paragraph 33 again, the key milestones, it says that the culture of some services has to change. So what would change? What was wrong with the culture in some services before and what was not working?
So I touched on it before, Councillor Anderson, and it's the culture. So 2 ways of looking at it really, and the culture word is slightly misleading. So coming back to Andy's point around the culture changes that we've put in when the Children's Trust moved back in, we've done a lot of that preparatory work, and we've really seen that. It was referenced in the Ofsted inspection, and actually 76% of our staff in our recent staff survey said that they like working in the council and particularly like working here. We have really high retention rates, so in my early help services, retention rates are touching 88%. We've got stability of workforce, reduction in agency staff. We have a settled workforce. So culturally, we haven't got a workforce that is a problem as such. What it means in terms of the cultural changes here is that management of risk by staff at a lower level. So we're asking staff that aren't social workers to manage more complex cases. The cultural changes that we've got there, like I touched on before, is historically, social workers have always done that. And actually early help staff or differently qualified staff haven't done that. So there is something culturally around making sure that the social workers feel confident that differently qualified staff are competent and experienced enough to manage more complex cases. That's culturally, that cultural change needs to happen, not just in Doncaster, but nationally. There's also a bit of a culture change that we're asking social workers maybe to step in and support rather than hold cases. That's a change in some of their terms and conditions. But also we're asking staff of differently qualified, be that health visitors, be that schools, to hold more complex cases. That in itself is a different way of working, and that I think is what we mean by culture in this respect.
So they're dealing with more complex situations that they haven't before, so what work would go on beforehand, that so they can deal with them more complex situations, if that makes sense, yes.
Okay. So we'll continue to have the local and early help services. what this is talking about is that children that are children in need or just before child protection, where the levels of need are above, so they're on a section 17, so they have a legal statutory framework to be historically have to be held by a social worker. What the Families First programme does and states is that doesn't have to happen anymore. They can be held by differently qualified staff, such as early help workers. That in itself is a cultural change about how we manage more complex cases by different staff. I don't know if I'm articulating that very well. Is that, yeah.
I thought you were, but there's, but I just thought I'd highlight just at the start of last week, we met with the North Pilot area, all the staff that have been involved in the pilot area, to talk to them about their experience of working in this different way. And in terms of cultural change, what they were talking about is it feels different to them being the person responsible for the risk. So previously, they'd be an individual who was trying to improve family functioning through the delivery of parenting programs. And that is important and very difficult work, actually. But it is not holding the statutory risk in terms of a child's plan. So culturally, that's a very different way to think about your work. And when they were doing their assessments previously were focused on family functioning and how to effectively help parents parent their children better. But now they had to think about not just how to help parent their children better, but also how that impacted on the risk that had brought them into contact with services. That is a very different way of thinking about your work. Now, that applies just for our own staff. So if you think that's the experience of our own staff who work adjacent to children's social care, now imagine the cultural change that might be if you're an attendance officer in a school, or you're a district nurse, where you've never had to think about how that risk impacts a child. You might have been part of a child protection or a core group where the risk of that child was managed, but you weren't the accountable person for it. So that is, in essence, the cultural change that people are going to experience. It's not just being part of a system that manages risk for children, it's being the accountable person for it. And that is quite different. And that will take some time. Now, for some staff have really embraced it and they've loved it in that North Pilot. For other rooms, they've found it difficult. But change is always like that, I think. Some people really embrace it and want to be part of it. Some people, it takes a little bit longer to move forward. But that's what we mean by cultural change.
Antoinette.
So you've identified it, you've evidenced the issues that might be involved. How have you got over the hurdle? Because obviously this will be a hurdle for some people across the piece when it's rolled out. How have you supported those who are perhaps more anxious or unwilling to accept those kind of changes?
So the first thing is we have these social work consultants whose job it is to do that, to develop. They're not consultants brought into Doncaster, I want to point that out. They're social workers we already employed that we have determined as social work consultants to work with those staff. Basically consulting them on social work practice. So that should give them some confidence that they're testing out these decisions. That ultimately the social worker makes the decision whether there's any risk, but they are still the accountable person. So it's about peer support from more experienced and qualified staff to help them develop that understanding, learning, and then operating their practice. But it's also about us as a leadership team being really visible and sitting down with them and saying, right, just tell us your experience, because this is about learning. It's not about you getting it right or wrong. It's about us understanding what's working well and what's not, and being able to support you around that. And if we have to commission specific training, like Lee mentioned before, the restorative practice training will be significant for staff. That will help drive up quality in this area. But you know, we like to think we are a learning organisation, and part of that is testing things out and staff feeling safe to do it. And I think it's a really good sign of a learning culture where staff feel able to say to the senior leaders of an organisation, I wasn't comfortable with that, and they were very, very candid with us. So, but that's good. But that helps us do better.
Because the success of the programme really might hinge on being able to bring all the staff on board, mightn't it? Well, it will do.
Yeah, that is the single most fundamentally important thing that we can do, because you can give us the money, we can put policies in place, we can put strategies in place, but unless we get a confident workforce, that it feels confident to make autonomous decisions, that feels supported by senior leadership, that's able to build relationships with families, this won't work.
Thank you, Antoinette. Councillor Needham, you have a supplementary question?
Of course. So we're talking about upskilling staff, and we're talking about taking staff on a journey and around competence and maybe things that have not happened before. So an example might be that a worker might have to write a court report, and that previously was probably a social work thing, not anymore. So my question is basically around supervision and management oversight. So based on supporting staff to improve and buy in and be part of the journey that ultimately has a tremendous effect on families using relational practice, in terms of management oversight and supervision, is that a strengths-based approach? And also, if it gets kind of like more serious or out of depth again, what's the transition process between help and harm, and what does that look like?
That's a really good question. So in terms of the supervision, they're having joint supervision with social work managers and their existing manager. So like a matrix managed system, and everyone said that that has worked well, that they felt supported and that they've not been forced into positions where they were making decisions that they didn't feel able to make. Even if they felt differently about it, they did feel supported. But that continuum between help and harm is really important. And Lee spoke at the start about the multi-agency child protection teams, which are part of this change. Like I say, we're not doing too much around that in Doncaster just yet. We're keeping our existing child protection chairs, our child protection conferences, and that work being overseen by a qualified social worker. But the way that we've structured the teams, so from targeted early help to early help workers holding SIN, that they're working in social work teams. So the escalation would be within their own service area. Yeah. And what we hope, though, and we've seen this in the North Pilot, one of the family workers had two cases who'd been right on the edge of child protection. It made her very anxious. But because we had the social work insight, support, and management, she was able to manage that, and it stayed at the level it should have, and is actually achieving good outcomes now. So this is hard what we're doing. You know, Lee and I aren't sat here saying this is going to be easy. This is a fundamental change to how we deliver practice, and we will learn along the way. But that step up, step down, that will exist within teams, and we are paying, critical attention to all these families to ensure that they're getting the best service and we're taking the learning from it. But, in 6 months' time, I might be saying something different to you about how that threshold moves, because it is learning locally.
So thank you. So I mentioned quite a lot there, and you probably didn't catch one of the things I wanted to say. So is the management oversight and supervision that you spoke about within the team, and it might have the worker and an early help manager, and it might have a social work manager, is that strength-based? Is there room to development in there for people to be able to grow without being absolutely petrified that they can't do anything before making a mistake?
Sorry, Councillor, I should have answered that more clearly. Yes, is the short answer. Solution focused, strengths-based, that has been our supervision model for some time, and it has worked. If you look at the Ofsted outcomes in terms across the whole system, so we're really lucky in Doncaster to have a number of fantastic managers, team managers, social work managers, early help managers. But people have been with us for a long time, so we know each other's thresholds. They know the thresholds that exist between help and harm, stepping up and down. So it is absolutely a strengths-based, solution-focused approach, and it will only be enhanced once everyone has completed the restorative training. That will make it better, even more than it is already. Does that answer you?
Just the other bit on that as well, though, your point around would they feel confident to do things when make mistakes, and as Andy's alluded to, we are a learning organisation. We've had external verification of that from a number of sources. We really need to pay attention to this as senior leaders to make sure that staff feel confident to have a voice to kind of go, do you know what, I'm not comfortable with this, or I'm worried about this, because you're asking me to do things that I've never done before, and I'm really worried I'm going to get it wrong. And we need to empower managers to be equipped to give opportunities to hear that voice, but also senior leaders. We're really mindful, and we're picking this up on almost weekly basis through liaising directly with teams, as Andy's talked about. We've gone and sat with the North Pilot teams. We'll be doing this on a regular basis, so staff hopefully feel able to go, crikey, this is really difficult. I don't know what to do. And actually, it's fine for us to go, do you know what? We're not quite sure either. Let's all learn together, because that empowers people, and that's very much what we're aiming for.
That's because you don't always learn things by getting it right all the time, do you? And there's got to be a safe mechanism for people to be unsure or even get it wrong, because that's how people learn, and that's where strength comes from. So thank you. That was my question, really.
Thank you, Councillor Needham. Antoinette?
It was just, the report talks about working with partners, with much wider partners, and that includes schools, doesn't it? So, and it will entail many challenges, I'm sure, but the outcomes should be positive. Will successes in these areas be reported? Because there are obvious successes, like, you know, less children in care, etc. But, you know, are we looking at children's GCSE results, or, you know, school readiness, or other things as well? And will we hear about those?
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't know what they are yet, and we've purposely not necessarily put them in. So we mentioned the 10 early help outcomes before that I mentioned. That is the wrapper in which we're going to look at the metrics. The actual tangibles within that are still to be decided. We made a conscious decision not to decide what they are for partners until we've had the conversations with partners to say, actually, from a health point of view, what do you want us to measure? But what is interesting is that the changes to working together, policy changes, is that educational neglect features more prominently than it's ever done before. And educational neglect is children not being in school. That's never been as loud as it has been before. So that would be a good measure for us, for example. School readiness, absolutely. So this isn't just about children in early help and children in social care, because it's an ecosystem, isn't it? We know families operate within that ecosystem. So there will be other metrics. Once we've agreed them, we'll certainly bring them back. We've got a programme board that reports into the Children's Safeguarding Board. On a monthly basis, progress will be monitored. On a quarterly basis, DFE want confirmation about how we're spending their money, understandably, and they're asking for a series of metrics as well. We have a subgroup under the programme board that's developing all these. So again, once we've got them, I'm certainly happy to share them.
There are some simple ones as well, like, you know, tooth decay. You know, children who are neglected, significantly more tooth decay, and will be seen by health professionals, won't they, and things like that, speech and language issues and so on.
If I may come back in, things like obesity, just some of those economic and social measures are really, really important, because children just don't end up in child protection overnight, and some of these early preventative measures are going to be really important actually for us. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Antoinette. Does anybody have any further questions they'd like to ask while we're still here? No? Okay. Now the discussion is finished, I would like to move to the recommendations. These are set out at paragraph 9 of the report. Does the panel feel like it has reviewed the information provided today?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Can I ask if there are any additional recommendations? If so, what are they, and what is the supporting reason for the recommendations? No? Okay. Can I ask, therefore, note the vision and plan of the Doncaster Family Model and the Families First Partnership Programme Board will be accountable for delivery of the programme. Okay. Agenda item 7, overview and scrutiny work plan and council's forward plan of key decision, pages 25 to 38. I will introduce Christine Rothwell to outline the report. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Chair. This is the report that you get every time that you have a formal panel meeting. It outlines the full overview and scrutiny work plan that's across the five areas that we have, and also the Council's forward plan of key decisions. It's there for your information, and the work plan's there just for you to monitor. If you have any questions or anything that you need to put forward, then obviously you can email or speak to the Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I've not pressed the thing. Does the panel note the report? I would now like to close the meeting and thank you all for your attendance today. Thank you.